Hello, Delulus, and welcome to the first live episode of season 2 of the House of Delusion, your go to Lady Gaga podcast. I'm Bling, and today we're streaming live from our House of Delulu stage channel on Discord. Us three have all seen Joker FAD, and we're ready to share our thoughts on the film, Gaga's performance as Harley, plus what it all means and how it connects to Gaga's latest album, Harlequin. But first, let's say hello to our favorite hosts.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle. If you don't know that already, screw you. I'm excited to join Bling and Connor. Of course, it's live, so I have something in my throat. Love that for me. Excuse
Hey,
me. Hmm?
hey, it's Connor again. Hey, hi. How are you?
I mean, I wasn't done, but yeah, sure, go ahead. Why not?
Live television, someone go.
No, I mean, I think that was funnier. The way it went is just, that's entertainment.
Okay, great. So
Stop.
Connor and Cal are joining me today. Um, and we hope that everyone has seen the film because this is not a spoiler-free. I'm doing my tea right now. I don't know if any. Oh, my tea mug matches. Um, so we hope everyone has seen the film because this is definitely not a spoiler-free um review. So, um, first, I'm just gonna give an overview of what today is gonna be. So we're gonna give an overview of the film, which I think will offer different perspectives for how each of us saw the film, what we think it means, how we think it relates to the Harlequin album. And then the second half of the episode, we will give our reviews on the film as a whole, which are varying. Again, how it connects to the album, how the album enhances our experience with the film, and then also the elephant in the room, the negative reception, and all the commentary that's been going on with the film. So, um, it's more fun the more you guys participate. So, if you have questions, if you want to chat with other people, if you want to offer theories of your own, please participate as much as you like. I know that Ganji saw the film for the first time today, and I think I've spoken with almost everyone here regarding the film. So this is going to be fun. So, um, what I noticed in the film, the overall themes. Well, I guess we'll just start at the beginning. That makes sense, right? So we all saw the first film and how it ended, and so the second film starts with a cartoon sequence featuring, which came out of nowhere. Um, but we
But I was,
saw what's that?
but I was living for it.
Right. So it starts with a Joker sequence, cartoon sequence featuring Joker's shadow. Um, there is like, so he's walking into the theater, or I guess it's like the Murray show, the cartoon version, and there's like a poster of Murray. Him and the shadow self are battling. He goes into the hallway, and I noticed this the first time, but the second time I saw, so in the hallway there's all these posters. um there are artists, because Cal really helped me understand in our Harlequin podcast episode, which if you haven't listened to it you should. Cal helped me understand the original tracks that Gaga covered for the Harlequin album. So the posters in the hallway of the cartoon intro featured Charlie Chaplin, Chapin,
Chaplin. You
Chaplin,
got it right. Yeah.
Sinatra. There was a Sweet Charity musical poster, which and more, which were featured on the Harlequin album. So while I take a sip of tea, what did you guys think of the intro, and what do you think it means, and like why did they do the cartoon intro?
Mm.
Uh, I personally was living for it. I actually really liked it. I thought it was an interesting way to open the film, as well as kind of give the audience a taste of what the music was going to be like for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Um, it reminded me of those old Looney Tune episodes, and we'll get into it later. But like in a lot of the jail scenes, Looney Tunes is playing on the TV that Arthur is watching.
Yep.
So it was almost like a form of escapism for him. And so it was an interesting way to open the film, and I did like it. Um, yeah, and the animation was cool too. I like that it looked like a 1960s Looney Tunes episode.
Yeah, especially, getting something new, quote unquote, in the year of our Lord 2024 in that style is always welcome. It's always very fun. I mean, I thought, essentially the purpose of it is to like kind of summarize the main points of the first film really quickly in a kind of jovial way, just to like get the audience back up to speed in case they haven't, just done a double feature of it. And I also think it kind of projects some of the themes of this film very early on. For example, is it really Arthur and Joker, or is it just Arthur, or is it just Joker? And how much of it is him? How much of it is not? The public loves something that is not actually Arthur. All of that stuff that we're going to be talking about later is already, kind of part of the themes of this cartoon short. Um, and like Bling mentioned, I mean, I think it's cool to note that, some of the songs that were on Harlequin and some of the songs that, were in the film originate from some of the movies that had posters on the wall in the hallway in this short. So, like Bling said, there was a poster for Sweet Charity. And I think If My Friends Could See Me Now is from that musical. So, it's kind of like small little Easter egg stuff like that. Um, yeah, yeah, that's basically my thoughts. Sort of a cute little thing.
So, Connor, I just sent you a message from the Delulu support account. Can you send me the outline so I can have it on the screen? So the thing that it reminded me of, and a big part of, I kept getting this like the quote from American Horror Story Hotel where Gaga talks about we have two selves, and I think she specifically mentions a shadow self. Um, like one you present to the world and one that's hidden, and something about like if you don't honor both it'll destroy you, or something like that. So and we'll discuss it throughout the podcast, but there were so many things presented in the film that I feel like as longtime Gaga fans, we really, it was like super obvious like how much it relates to Gaga, Stephanie, um, and we've seen her struggle with that this whole time. Thank you, Connor. So so yeah, I find the film very fascinating in that way. So we have this intro, and then um what I also found interesting was the film ended in a hallway scene, and the first film, and the second film started in another long hallway mirrored scene. There's a lot of mirrored scenes, and I love self-referential stuff. That's why I love the Harlequin exclusive cover. Um, so we start the film, and just so you guys know, we're not going to go through every single scene obviously, but I feel like there's a lot of context that will help us understand, number one, the meaning of the movie, but also Harlequin's character, how it relates to what we know about Gaga, stuff like that. So one of the first things I noticed from the beginning of the film is one of the guards is whistling When the Saints. And you'll notice songs that are featured on Harlequin are featured throughout the film, but in very subtle ways, whether it's someone whistling, or in one of the scenes, someone is like, one of the inmates is playing the trombone or horn or something. um, so The next thing that I think would apply to Gaga is when Arthur is discussing the situation with his lawyer. Because we know that Gaga is at her own struggles with trigger warning. Gaga's had her own struggles with trauma and abuse and how that manifests in humans. And so I thought the film was really interesting in that, in a very creative way, is showing what can happen to people um, when they don't receive the help that they need. So I think a big part of this film is like, how would things have happened differently if Arthur had received the help that he needed? How would things happen differently if this took place in 2024 versus in the 80s? So I find that really interesting. But on topic, I guess that's all on topic. When his lawyer is explaining to him that she believes one of the doctors that has worked with Arthur says that because of Arthur's childhood trauma and abuse, it caused a split or a fragmentation, um, in which another personality was created to help him cope. Now, this reminded me of Gaga's one of the late night Stephen Colbert interviews, where she's talking about trauma and how it gets locked in a box to protect yourself. And as I saw these things in the movie, I was like, no wonder she signed up for this. So what did you guys think of this kind of explanation? Or I feel like a lot of people were kind of like confused as to like this whole plot line of like, who is Joker, who is Arthur. Like, what did you guys think of that kind of intro scene where they're talking about the separate self?
I mean, from the standpoint of the film's plot, it makes sense that that is the defense that his lawyer would want to pursue, because it would mean he would avoid the death penalty and he would just be in an insane asylum for the rest of his life. But going past that and further examining the messages of that split personality throughout the film, it's kind of interesting because, for me at least, I don't think the film ever truly answers if he does have a legitimate split personality, but it does showcase that Arthur is very conflicted with these sides of himself, with these outbursts of just emotion and anger, um, and once again, it kind of just continues the storyline from the first film of how he was a very troubled person that never got the care that he received, and he lashed out in terrible ways. But in a way, the society and the government is still accountable, because if proper systems and planning was put in place, if they didn't cut the funding, he would have still been able to get his medication. And it's interesting that the film tries to touch on, is this more of a mental issue, a split personality, or is this more of like a failure of our society on an average man?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I think once you've seen the whole film and you've had time to think about it, you come up with slightly different um, ideas than you would have if you're just watching the film in the moment. And so thinking back, and I know at this point that the Joker and Harley and everything is more like an allegory for the pressures of the Joker and the impact that he has, and not necessarily just the split personality thing. It almost seems like it's arguing, like, are we really all the expectations that people put on us, or are we just ourselves and what we want to do with our own lives, right? That's another way you could possibly look at it, based on just kind of knowing the role that Harley plays. Is like, I guess we'll get into exactly what Harley is, as we get further on into this episode, and what people look at the Joker as, is he a monster? Is he a savior? I mean, no, it's just Arthur, right? Um, I also thought it was interesting that when he was being recorded, and they brought in the expert, with the tape, and she said, "Is it okay if I ask these questions to the Joker?" Right? So they're already going in assuming that he has dissociative identity disorder. They're putting the cart before the horse. It's not very scientific.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really think the film cares about following the scientific method in any real way, but that's something even on my watch in the moment I remember thinking in the theater, like that doesn't seem like something you're supposed to do. You're supposed to prove something and then kind of try and defend what you think is the truth and not come up with the idea and then try to force the idea into what you want. But not only does it kind of make sense for, you're trying to save someone's life, but it also makes sense in the theme of the movie of, you know, oh, this is what I think he is, therefore I'm going to go for it. So even the people that are on his side already are kind of doing the same thing as the people who aren't on his side or who project onto him something bigger than who Arthur really is, which is, oh, we have this idea of who you are, therefore we're going to run with that. Um, I mean, at this point, I'm just rambling. I'm not even really answering the original question that Bling
No, I think you
asked.
are.
Um, um, I mean, I'm just sort of spitballing random takes at this point. But, I think, I honestly think that the question of whether he does have a split personality or not is slightly sidelined by the greater meta commentary that the film might be trying to really say about its audience and about everything else. It makes sense in universe, but I'm not entirely sure if it's super relevant for like the larger questions or the larger goals I may be trying to accomplish, which is part of why, so many people apparently don't like the film.
Yeah.
But
I also to put it into the uh context of the 80s. It was like
mhm.
I feel like maybe it was like, oh well, this seems like a completely other person, so let's just call it this, versus it could just be PTSD. And he's apparently, if things have gone differently, he was going to receive treatment for um dissociative identity disorder. And it's like this whole question of, even today, it's like, people are diagnosed with different things, and it's actually just symptoms of unresolved trauma. And so it's like, if they had just addressed the trauma, it
Mhm.
wouldn't be this, potentially, I'm not a mental health professional, but it could potentially not be this whole like split personality thing. um the other thing I didn't mention is, in the beginning, the guards are all asking him for jokes, so they're asking him to perform, which reiterates this like, my cat is here, reiterates this like, um sensationalism, and this ongoing theme in the film of like, Arthur is a product, kind of like Gaga has been for us. And well, that sounded bad, but I just feel like this idea of fame, we think of it one way as far as like a celebrity, but like murderers get fame. Um, all these different things. So it was just very interesting how they showed all of these things. Um, in that interview that he is giving, he also speaks in his mother's voice, which he did in the first film, and we're kind of like, is that a split personality? We don't know. I just thought it was interesting. We also found out they made a TV movie about him, so reiterating this concept of fame. Um, then we get into, I'm working on like two different outlines over here, so bear with me. So then we another thing I wanted to point out was that a lot of people felt the ending was very random, but unfortunately, because I moderate the server, I read a spoiler about the ending um way before I saw the film, and I noticed the same inmate appears literally in one of the very first scenes. And I saw the movie a second time, and never get a cat, ladies and gentlemen. Um, so I saw the film a second time, and this person who appears in the end, which we won't give anything away yet, but they appear all throughout the film. So I found that very interesting in that it wasn't really random at all. So now we are coming up to our introduction to Gaga. So we had seen this scene um, in the trailer, where he sees her. Jesus Christ. Where he sees her through.
He just wants to be close to you.
I know. We see the scene where Gaga's looking through the doorway and Joaquin is, approaching the music room and she's singing and they make eye contact. And that's our first view of Harley. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up was because he sees her in the room and then he keeps walking and then he turns back and she's standing in the hallway and does this like thing. And throughout the film, you have to think, because he imagined relationships with women before, did that really happen? How much of what we see of Harley actually happens? I felt that they presented it a lot of different scenes in different ways where he could be turning around and thinking he's talking to someone, but he's actually not. So I do think Harley was an actual character, but I think it's up for discussion of like how many times she appeared were actually real. So did you guys have any, I mean, the intro to her we kind of already saw in the trailer, so like did you have any like different reactions to seeing her for the first time in the film? I mean, it was pretty short.
I thought it was a good introduction. But yeah, we've all seen it from the trailers. I think it was an interesting way to. Can I talk about this right now? Just like overall her like differences from like what we have seen of the character in the past.
Oh yeah, whatever. For just so you guys know, this is completely open, like conversational, so whatever comes up, like feel free to discuss.
I think one of the many, 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 many reasons why fans of the first and comic book fans are getting their panties in a bunch about this film is because historically, Harley Quinn was his psychiatrist who fell in love with him and ended up being his Bonnie to his Clyde. But this time, they just say she has a psychiatry background, but she's not a psychiatrist. And we ultimately find out, she's like committed herself because she's obsessed with the Joker. It was interesting what Todd and Gaga tried to do with this character. They made her like do you guys know the murderer Charles Manson? They almost made her like one of his groupies. Like
Yeah.
she was so lost as a person and she found him so fascinated. She just wanted to make her whole life about him. And so the way we saw from the very get-go that she was very manipulative because she wanted to get super close to Arthur really fast was very interesting, because we find out later on all these things she tells him are lies. And I just thought she had such a sly, like laid back, almost cool girl energy to her, almost like Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted.
Yeah.
And I thought Gaga did great with that. So I really enjoyed her first few scenes. And I was just impressed that they had such a solid chemistry together. Joaquin Phoenix is a very well-known, respected actor, and she's fairly new to this. And you didn't get the vibes at all that she was nervous or apprehensive about shooting scenes with him. And I thought the two of them had a very natural rapport. But yeah, I liked the way the character was introduced in the film, and I thought it got the point across to the audience pretty quickly that this is not very similar at all to Margot Robbie's version of the character we've seen in films.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to talk about why people are upset, I mean, I know that that's a topic that we wanted to save to the very end, but apparently we're talking about it a little bit now. I mean, I think, the comic book fans want a comic book movie, right? So he pairs up with Harley Quinn and they paint the town red and blow stuff up and fight Batman and, the end, right? But that's not what this movie even is. I'll stop there so we actually have something to talk about later. But I mean, in terms of, her introduction, being just like the trailers, yeah, you know,
Yeah, it's interesting.
nothing.
I'm just gonna say it's interesting you say that because that is a common. Even my partner, when we went to see it yesterday, he was like, "Oh, I thought they were gonna be like killing people and blowing stuff up," and I find that humorous because the first film I feel like set the tone that this is very much grounded in reality and very much
Mm,
the experience of someone who not everyone is mentally ill, and not everyone that's mentally ill does these things, but it's this individual's experience and how that could end up in murder. And I just thought it was interesting because that's uh, we kind of I didn't think that that's what it was going to be based on seeing the first film, but I just thought that was interesting. The one thing I did want to point out was early in the film, there is this supporting character who asks Arthur for a kiss because the guards told him that Arthur is a good kisser, but I think they call him Joker. And I think it was a way for the filmmaker to, in a way, have a gay character. Um, if you watch a lot of older movies, they never say someone is gay, but they have these little clues, these little like subliminal things. So I personally think this character was gay, and um, throughout the film, Joker is kind of this figure for the underdogs, right? And so I feel like there is a little person, I guess that is the PC term these days, actor character that was in the first film. There, in my opinion, is a gay character, and so Arthur becomes this sort of beacon of hope for all of these misfits and stuff. Um, Before we get into the introduction of the music class, the one thing I loved was after the scene where he kisses the guy. Um, he gets a cigarette from one of the guards, and then he ends up in his cell, and there's this beautiful shot where it's pitch black, and then he lights the cigarette, and all you see, it's complete pitch black, and all you see is this tiny little uh ember thing or whatever when someone is inhaling a cigarette, and it's this beautiful piece of filmmaking. And it's interesting because the cigarettes also end up representing like Joker taking over throughout the film. And also, I noticed, I think in the first film too, Joaquin does this thing where like he leans back like this. And it's this very like power pose type thing. Whereas when you first meet Arthur, he's like this. So I thought that like physical acting or whatever you want to call it was very interesting. So Arthur finds out that the guards arranged for him to go to the music class. He goes to the music class, I mean, the music therapy session, pardon me. Lee is there. And I think a lot of people missed or didn't, I don't know, I think they missed this part, which I think is very crucial for the entire film, that the music therapy teacher says, uh, I'm paraphrasing, but music heals the fragmented parts of us. And he asks Arthur to sing whenever he feels it's right. And so I don't know when they were like planning this film if music therapy was sort of something that they had discussed, but to me it made sense that that's what it was. And the fact that his lawyer had just said fragmentation, and then the music therapy teacher said fragmented, and how music can heal it, I thought it was a very interesting way to set that up. So after he goes to the music therapy class, then he goes in the hallway and meets Lee, and I was just completely blown away by her acting. We've seen her in A Star Is Born, American Horror Story, House of Gucci, and in some ways I kind of always was like, oh, that's Gaga. And then in House of Gucci I was like, oh, she's really getting there. And in this film it was like what she does with her eyes and how she locks and she doesn't blink. And I feel like she really studied like manipulation and Like, what did you guys think of that intro scene where she's explaining who she is and her background and all of that?
Like I said, I thought it was a very good way to introduce the character, both to differentiate how the character has been portrayed in past films, and also set the stage for who she is and how she operates. But like you said, the way that she's very good with eye acting. You know, there's some actors like they basically get cast in superhero roles because they're really good with like their face acting. They look tough, they look sad, you know, all that. And in this film, she had a really great way of like emoting all the feelings with just her eyes. Like we'll talk about this later on, but there's a mirror scene where she just does so much with her
I really
eyes.
like this thing.
And I think the mirror scene might be my favorite um piece of acting she's done yet, next to the bathtub fight scene from A Star Is Born. But she just is so good at like emoting her feelings through her eyes, and you know, she just does a really great job at setting the stage for what the arc that the character eventually, the journey that the character eventually takes on from
Mm-hmm.
that point on. Um,
Yeah, and this commentary on fame is reiterated when she says that, you know, she had seen his TV movie film like 20 times, and it kind of begins this storyline of how she kind of represents, I mean, she represents a lot of different things, but I feel like in a way she represented like fans and fandom, and it's kind of interesting how she in her personal life has had her own uh storyline with fandom, and it was kind of like art imitating life type thing, and I feel like A Star Is Born in a way kind of did that, but I feel like this film really like hit the head on that. So we're kind of fast forwarding to the next Lee scene, where the inmates are being shown a film. Cal, did you catch what film that is? I know the only thing that I remember is that they're singing That's Entertainment.
It's The Bandwagon from 1953.
Okay. Um,
And actually, it was directed by Vincente Minnelli, who was married to Judy Garland and is Liza Minnelli's dad. So there's that.
Interesting.
And Frank Sinatra's in that movie.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, and honestly, after hearing That's Life, I need like a Gaga Frank Sinatra covers album, because there's just something about his like cool New York vibe that she really embodies. Um but fast forwarding to the scene, we'd kind of seen some of this in the trailer where they're watching the film and she's asking him to get out of there. He says that he can't. So we had previously heard her say that I'm like dodging my cat right now. We had previously heard her say that she had started her apartment building on fire. Whether that's true, we don't know. But she gets up, acts like she's lighting a cigarette, and then sets the piano on fire. And starts this beautiful scene of everyone rushing out and just like the colors that they chose. So it shows Gaga and Joaquin kissing, and behind them, the projector is going through them. And on the right side of the scene is the fire, and it's this, you know, the color of fire. And then on the left side of the scene, it's this like completely other, like greenish blue. And it's just such a beautiful image. Um, what did you guys think of that scene?
that scene's probably my favorite Harley and Joker scene in the whole movie, because it just reminded me so much of the chaotic energy that made those two such a popular duo amongst the comic book fan community. Um, which is why I think it's still a mistake that in the first movie to ever feature Harley Quinn back in 2016, why they had her and the Joker separated for most of the movie made zero sense to me, because those characters, but they really just explode when they're together. They have a great dynamic, and the two of them in that scene were fantastic. I mean, they run throughout the whole hospital, everything's on fire, they're trying to escape, they're like joking with each other. It was great. It was my favorite moment of the two together in the film, and I wish there had been more of those moments.
Absolutely. Yeah, because from go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, you mentioned the kiss in front of the projector. Um, and as we know, projectors are machines that take still images and create the illusion of movement by, moving them really, really fast. And so I think it's interesting that, they kiss in front of something that creates illusions when Harley herself could be, to varying degrees, an illusion that he creates. The love that they have is an illusion. The expectations that the audience has for their relationship is, that people have coming in when they see this movie is burst because they have this illusion, right? And so I think there was more thought behind when they kissed than I think a lot of people might be thinking.
Yeah.
And of course, the fire behind the projector, I mean, I think that's much more obvious symbolism. Like, this isn't going to end well. It's all going to go up in flames. And, look what happened, right? So I think that was constructed in a very particular way, given what we know, I guess, now as people who've seen the film know about Harley and what the role was of that character and everything. And as for like the chase through the hospital and them trying to escape and all that, I'm not entirely sure why they chose the song from Sweet Charity, If My Friends Could See Me Now, because it's not like we know anything about Harley Quinn outside of what Arthur learns about her. Like, we don't know if she has real friends or if she's been trying to get their attention or anything like that. So I thought that song choice was interesting. And maybe, if I think about it more, or, I read more analyses or hear from more people, it'll make sense. Like, someone will be like, this is why. I'm like, oh, okay. But I thought that choice was bizarre. I didn't quite understand why.
Well, I think
Um,
that song features the lyric something like uh this rich man chose an unknown gal like me or something like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's that one because the original song is about the girl Charity in that musical being seen and kind of feeling the power and the importance of being next to someone who's very important. So I guess in that sense, it makes sense um, because I guess Arthur has actually chosen her and is running around with her and is accepting her advances and everything. But I mean, if you don't listen to the lyrics and you've not heard that song before, and you're going into this movie, expecting you know Heath Ledger's Joker and Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, you're going to be like, I don't know what this song is, what is going on.
Yeah.
Which, because they would say about the entire rest of the movie too, to be fair. So
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up power, because that is another theme that I noticed throughout the movie, whether it be the power that Arthur gets from adapting Joker, the power that Harley has over Arthur, the imbalance of power, like how the guards felt threatened by the power that Joker had, the power of fame, the power that fame has over his followers or whatever. So there's a lot at play here. The last thing I want to say about this scene is that they're running and they jump on the cage, or the cage, the fence, cage fence. And it was interesting because there's flashing, and it reminded me of like paparazzi flashing, like her song Paparazzi. And then also they grab her off of the fence, and it reminds me of the Enigma thing where they're like, they had grabbed her and she's like fighting them, like she says like, get the fuck off me or something. um so after that scene, um Arthur is put into solitary confinement and we get our very awkward sex scene. um this was really interesting because she says that the guards let me in, and I feel like if you look at it in a different way, I mean, she's very suggestive. So it's like, what did she do to get in there? I'll let your guys' imagination kind of go there. But this scene is really interesting because she continues to manipulate him. She asks him to stop taking his medication, even though he says he already did. Um, every film and TV thing that Gaga has been in, there is a sex scene. I'm not shaming. I'm not shaming. It's just an observation. Um, I did find, I think, the sex scene aside, I loved the scene where she's putting on his makeup, and it kind of expands this thing of she's there for Joker. She's not there for Arthur. And I'm why am I getting goosebumps? I'm so weird. But I thought this was a very well done scene, and it's interesting too. At the end of the first film, you view Joker and Arthur as this powerful thing, and I think a lot of the followers in the movie did too. But then you see, he seems to be very, inexperienced with women, and it's interesting seeing this upper hand of Harley. And one of the ongoing themes I saw was like how Arthur's relationship with his mother is sort of juxtaposed, and how that affects his relationship with Harley. Um, I know that Connor and I had a conversation about this scene. So what did we think of this scene as a whole, and like how did Gaga do?
Can you do it for me? I threw myself on the floor. I was like, what's going on? It was so awkward, and I thought the House of Gucci sex scene was awkward. That one was loud and ridiculous, and this was just like, it felt like I was watching my parents have sex. Like, I just wanted to get up and leave the theater. It was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So thankfully it was not long at all.
Yeah.
Also, there's a pun.
Very quick.
Yes.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Finish, Connor.
No.
Oh, okay. I mean, I was just going to say that it helps to kind of underline the childishness and immaturity that Arthur has, because as we saw in the first film, he hasn't had a whole lot of friends. He hasn't had a whole lot of real connections. Hasn't had a whole lot of real life experience. So when stuff like this comes up, he doesn't really have like the cojones to really do it. He doesn't have that internal confidence to do his part, I guess.
Yeah.
So I mean, and we kind of see that going on, throughout the rest of the film too, in other parts that I can point out later. As for how Lee got in, I don't want to imagine any more straight sex than I already have to. But so I'm just going to say, oh, she's rich and she bribed them to get in with money. That's where my brain wants to stop.
Hey boys, if you let me see Arthur, I'll give you a year's worth of House Labs concealer.
I'm waiting for a House Labs meme of like him with the makeup on. I feel like we need that as a sticker. So the last thing I want to say about this scene is that at this point we don't know any like ulterior motives of Lee, but she said that they're releasing her because they think Arthur is a bad influence on her. And so then she's like, I can come see you every day. I can, she's just very locked in this way. And it's very convincing. So the next scene is Joker going on television, as Cal had said, being interviewed by this guy. And I thought this was really interesting, the guy being Patty. I thought this was really interesting because I feel this really shows in the 80s how people viewed murderers, how people viewed people with, because I mean, people who murder have mental health issues. And so again, in this question of like, if they had received the help that they needed, would they be in this situation? But we see Patty, the interviewer, be very aggressive and very trying to initiate,
get a response.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
for ratings, which works, unfortunately. To get ratings, which is unfortunately still the way the world works.
So at this point, we had kind of seen Arthur, I don't want to say one note, but we hadn't seen the kind of levels of the character yet. And this is sort of the first scene where he really gets annoyed. I think this is the second singing scene. If we had like all the time in the world, I could analyze this movie forever. But so he's just talking about like how in love he is with Harley. And that's one of my critiques of the film is that at this point it's like when you see A Star Is Born or something, there's enough scenes that make you fall in love with the characters and make you root for the characters and make you want them to be together. And at this point, we have one scene with Joker and Harley just seeing each other, one scene where they're talking and laughing together, and then a sex scene, and them escaping. So it's like at this point, I I mean maybe it's like Cal said because he's so inexperienced. He's like I love her, but and I guess since it's not a romance, like my point is mute, but I felt like as a viewer I was like, "Oh." But you know, if you I don't want to like get this video taken down off of YouTube, but you know, people fall in love very quickly when they're very young. So, I thought that was interesting. Um
16
and then we see Gaga iconically like break the glass and steal the television, which you know is symbolic in its own way. Did you guys have anything to say about that scene or what it means or anything?
um that scene for a second did make me wonder how manipulated she was, because she really felt like seen and heard, and the way he was singing directly to her, you could tell she actually really took that personally, and appreciated that attention he was giving her.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that still is the Joker singing to her, not Arthur. And so it just further adds to the discussion of who did she really love, Joker or Arthur? And it's clear she loved Joker.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love
And
how she was, excuse me, and just throws the TV, the trash can into the
Yeah.
yeah.
window.
So polite, so demure, so mindful. Excuse
Yes.
me. I mean, I definitely think, she's in love with the Joker, and the Joker kind of came out a little bit during the interview, once Patty kind of got under his skin a little bit. Because he did the same sort of vocal thing where he said Paddy, kind of like how you said Murray when he was about to kill
Yeah.
Murray.
Like mocking
So you can kind of tell, like,
kind of.
yeah, you can kind of tell like that was sort of in there a little bit. So the Joker side, if you want to kind of assume that there are two people and the Joker is kind of coming out here. I mean, this is one of the scenes where you could argue that that's happening, happens here. And in terms of like the whole love thing, yeah, like Bling said, if you're very young, you fall in love quickly. But I also think if you're just inexperienced with love, you fall in love very quickly. I mean, normally it's when you're young because you're inexperienced when you're young. But if you're Arthur Fleck and your life just sucks, then you will be inexperienced until it happens in your mid 30s or however old Arthur Fleck is. And I also think there should be a distinction drawn between actual love, which is what people tend to grow and learn what that feels like as they get older and have more experience, versus limerence, which is like that overwhelming desire to be with someone and you hyper focus on them and you put them on a pedestal, and that takes much, much less time to happen than actual love does. And so I think for both of them, it's more of like a limerent relationship. And limerence, of course, is much less healthy, kind of like how fame is a lot less healthy. The expectations of the public or the audience on Arthur Fleck are a lot less healthy, that kind of thing. So I don't even really think it's love. I think it's much more just sort of like a quick, immature, limerent attraction.
Yeah.
I
What I was
I
trying
just
to get at without saying it was like how when people have their first experience, they often say, "I'm in love now," because of the rush of the hormones and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to say that without saying it. Um,
I just
Go Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to quickly add that Cal mentioned Arthur being someone in his mid-30s. That is a rough mid-30s.
Well, he's had a rough life, okay? I'm trying to be generous here.
Yeah.
Not too many people have been nice to him, so let me be
That
nice
is
to
one
him.
50-year-old looking 35-year-old man.
So,
Well,
I didn't get like the full synopsis, so I feel like I may be skipping some crucial Lee scenes. But next we see Harvey Dent, who we know is Two-Face in the Batman world, who's the assistant district attorney in the film.
He's hot.
I mean, he's not my type, but so this fame storyline keeps going, right? We see all of these fans and supporters outside of the courthouse, and so I just thought it was very interesting. And so in the I do feel like we're skipping a lot, but I feel like the main kind of like Gaga-esque stuff is like towards the second half of the film. But what I thought was interesting was in the one of the first courtroom scenes, the notes that I have. So they were saying that they think he's faking his mental illness. So it brought in this question because I remember there's a scene in the first film where Arthur's talking to his mother, and he's saying, "Remember how you told me my laugh was a condition from a brain injury?" And he said that you made that up. And so you see in the second film he isn't really afflicted with that, and so it's never really answered, like, was it just something that his mom told him, because you see him on the way to the courthouse trying to bring the laugh back. It's this really interesting thing. The other note I have is retreat into fantasy due to trauma. And so I thought that was interesting because as Gaga fans, we know her experiences, and she talked about how when and early in her career, specifically when she would, wear all the outfits and do all the things, she was saying that like she hated reality and she loved this fantasy world. And so I thought it was interesting Arthur's struggles with trauma and how he coped, and Gaga and Stephanie there, I guess I should say Stephanie and not Gaga, how she experienced trauma and how she coped, and how those kind of mirror each other. um
You're like Joaquin in his interviews. Do I call you Stephanie? Do I call you
I
Gaga?
know, right? So this scene just kind of like reiterates that in the 80s, like they didn't really know what it was. um but I'm kind of leading into the next scene where we start to find out that Lee is not who we thought she was. So the lawyer, who the iconic, is it Catherine Keener?
I love her.
Yeah, she's an amazing actress.
She was so
So we find out that Lee was a psychiatry student who grew up on the Upper East Side, meaning money. Her father is alive and is a doctor, and that she voluntarily committed herself to Arkham, checked herself out, and she never burnt down an apartment building. And so we have this really interesting scene where this is the Sonny and Cher scene, I believe, where Gaga and Joaquin, or I'm sorry, Harley and Arthur, or Joker rather. This is our first kind of appearance of Joker in the full makeup. And they're singing this To Love Somebody. It's this very like 70s variety. I'm old. I know what a variety hour is. A lot of you people probably don't know
yeah.
what a variety hour is, but and so they're singing this duet, and then it's this kind of metaphorical thing. So Harley starts singing the song by herself, and they have this little dialogue about how she made it about herself, and then they do this funny thing. And then Harley pulls a gun on Arthur and shoots him. And in my viewing, I thought it was what sort of a visual representation of what Arthur was feeling, and feeling betrayed by Lee.
Yes, for
Mhm.
sure. 110%. And also, that is probably my favorite musical number from the film, just because I think it's so ridiculous that they have a Harley version of Sunny and I mean of Cher and a Joker version of Sunny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, microphones. There, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, but no, for sure, he's like in his mind in this like twisted musical fantasy. He already knows that she's not really there for him and for all the right reasons. Um, and you can tell he's not quite sure what to believe, especially after all the trauma he's had in his life and all the failed relationships, whether that would be with women or just people at his job or his mother. Um, it all kind of came to fruition.
Um, and so then we see another really great scene. Let me just make sure I'm not skipping anything. So Arthur confronts um or I'm sorry, Harley comes to visit Arthur in like the confessional booth. Um
Yeah,
what is it called? Like
grief.
uh visitation booth?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
So he
sure.
confronts
That
her
place.
about her lying, and we start to see this before the manipulation was kind of discreet, but now it's very explicit. And it's one of my favorite scenes of Gaga. Um, so he confronts her, and she says, everybody lies. Um, she says that um, she just wanted to get close to him. So I have really read a lot about manipulators and abusers and the kind of like the psychology behind it. And one of the things that they do is they try and convince you that people that care about you don't care about you. And one of the things that in isolation, and one of the things that she says is that um, I don't remember specifically, but she's talking about how the lawyer is not on Arthur's side and she doesn't want the best for him and stuff like that. And so it's this very manipulative thing. And she starts singing. Do you remember what song it was?
Close to you. Close to you.
She starts singing "Close to You." Um, and one of my favorite parts is towards the end where she's like looking like this, and you start to see the like really evil part of Lee. And I had never seen Gaga like that, and that's probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when towards the end of when she's singing that song she's looking at him like this, and it's very like I've got you, because he started singing back. And it's this continuation of Gaga using music to manipulate Arthur. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
um
And I guess the pregnancy thing, but
oh yes,
happens
She wasn't. It was a lie.
yes.
yeah,
It
Oh,
was a
well,
I
duh.
didn't notice this the first time, but she lights up a cigarette and then tells him that she's pregnant.
the 80s. Can I have a glass of wine? Who cares?
I guess that's right. I
So,
didn't think about that.
also have a scene in House of Gucci where she's drinking with a baby bump? Or was that cut? I remember seeing pictures.
I don't remember that. But thank you. I can't remember who mentioned the pregnancy. But yes, it's like once abusers and manipulators start to see that you are catching on, they will use these other tactics to try and lock you down.
Yeah.
I hate that I know all of this stuff, but
Well, no, it's helpful here.
yeah. So she uses the pregnancy thing to try and lock him in. She says that, which it's never clear, but she says that she rented his old apartment so that they can have a life together after. And another thing that manipulators and abusers do is they create this fantasy or idyllic world to sell to you so that you'll buy into it, I guess. Um,
My theater laughed when she said, I moved into your old apartment. We can start a life there. And he's like, I don't want to live there. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, because I mean, he literally like murdered someone there.
Mhm.
So I can't remember like the chronologicalness of this. Oh, but so then we see Gary Puddles, the character from the first film that witnessed Joker killing uh
Puddles.
I can't remember the name of the guy, but this scene to me was very pivotal because um we'd kind of skipped a beats, but basically like Joker fires his lawyer, Arthur fires his lawyer, decides that he's gonna represent himself, and um it was interesting because uh or I think before that, okay, so the events leading up to this, so Sophie Dumont from the first film, who was the woman that he had a crush on, that he had this imagined relationship with, takes the stand in the courtroom and says that um, she had been talking to Arthur's mother, and her mother called his laugh a dumb laugh. She says that Arthur's mother told him a story so that he would stop crying so that he wouldn't kill himself. And that she was surprised that Arthur based his whole life on this story that his mother told him. So I feel like a lot of things in the first film were presented, but the second film really cemented things for us. And that is when Arthur really um, kind of freaks out and is like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want you as my lawyer. So he fires his lawyer, and um, this is leading up to one of my favorite scenes of the movie. I can't remember if this is before or after the Gary Puddle scene, but the Joker scene where he sings the Joker.
Oh, I
That's
that
right before he fires his lawyer
Okay,
because
so
he's hearing Sophie's testimony and he goes kind of crazy, does the Joker, fires her, and then it's Gary Puddles.
the Joker. I did like
So
that scene.
I definitely prefer Gaga's version, but this was just so visually stunning. He starts singing and then he gets up and Harley is, right behind him, and she like seductively walks around and he like hits Harvey Dent with a stool. Um, Harley sits on the table and then she uses his blood to like do the smile thing, and it was just very like seductive, sultry, sexy, jazzy song. And he's like shooting people, and it was just this. I felt like more people would be sold on the musical idea if more of the musical moments in the film were like that. Um, but looking
Had a lot
back,
of energy.
what's that?
That had a lot of energy, and we'll get into our actual criticism of the film later. But I wish more of the musical sequences had that kind of energy and flair. I mean, with the giant, oversized hammer, which was kind of like a nod to the Harley Quinn
Looney
usually has,
Tunes. Mm,
or a hammer, and when
Oh,
he it felt like something out of like the 1960s Batman. I expected the like bing pow, like
bam.
yeah, it was really ridiculous, but I really liked that sequence.
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah,
thinking
I
about it
put.
now, I'm just now realizing that there were different types of musical scenes. There were those, which was like the fantasy world. Well, I guess they're all kind of the fantasy world, but like the scene we had just seen where Harley is singing at the visitation booth, where it doesn't get extravagant, it doesn't get crazy, it's just them. And then in the beginning, like one of the first times that Arthur sings, it's like amongst the guards while the inmates while they're watching TV. It's not extravagant. So it was interesting that there were a lot of different types of musical scenes. Like some are very over the top, and then some are just them in the same setting. Um, Anything else about the Joker scene?
I mean, I just put in the chat that it was very Chicago, the musical Chicago,
Absolutely.
because they kind of go between like different mini scenes by lighting changes, which is very Chicago. Like if you remember, what was the name of that freaking song, the Cell Block Tango, and how it goes between different people with the lighting changes, and that kind of shows scene shifts. It was very much like that.
Yeah, I a lot of people are ragging on Todd Phillips, and I really loved his choose. I'm very into colors and how we associate colors with feelings and why they chose certain colors, why they chose certain angles. And I was just very impressed with how like visually stunning the film is. So that is one of my top favorite scenes. Um, the note I have here is Joker taking over. So I feel like this was one of the first scenes where we really felt like Joker is taking over. So then he fires his lawyer. They bring he, becomes Joker with the makeup and everything, and then Gary Puddles, the his coworker, previous coworker that had witnessed him kill um the bully. Um I thought it was a very fascinating testimony, not only because the testimonies of the characters from the first film, it's like, oh, we finished the film, but what happened to these other people? So you kind of think of trauma and abuse and all of these things as like a ripple effect. So like it affects you, but then it's going to affect the people around you that witnessed it. It's going to affect, if you don't get the treatment that you need, it can affect your children, it can affect your spouse, and then it's generational trauma. And so it was interesting how Arthur was having this experience where he, murdered this person, and he didn't even think about the experience of his coworker. And so the coworker is literally traumatized, and he explains his feelings, and he talks about how he felt powerless. And it reiterated to me this storyline or this theme of power and this exchange of power, because because the Joker was so powerful and did this thing, it took a lot of the power away from Gary Puddles, and he succumbed to this trauma image that he was scared to go to work, all of these things. And so I felt like it really gave a face to people who have been traumatized.
Yeah, it was interesting because most movies that deal with traumatic events, it almost felt like a Scream sequel where one of the survivors came back and you like saw like how they dealt with it. Was like Hayden Penny. I suck with pronunciation, y'all. Hey,
Panettiere, yeah.
yes. How she came back to the last one and you kind of saw that
Spoiler
the
alert.
events you saw the events of the last one pushed her to like pursue a life in like law and become like a detective. So to see like all these characters suffer from these traumatic events in the last film and then see how some are doing was pretty interesting. And I felt bad for Puddles. I mean, poor guy already has so much going for him. I mean, and you could tell the Joker Arthur was like, "Damn, I really screwed this up."
Yeah, I mean, in my view, I mean, this was one of my favorite sequences in the film, personally. And I think it's one of the turning points in the film as well, because the whole first movie and, the first, I guess, half of this movie is about how Arthur, is kind of a victim, and he's, of society or fame, or, whatever kind of analysis you're trying to give of whatever forces are acting upon him. And this is, I think, the first time that he's like, well, shit, I'm not the only victim. It's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm doing is hurting people. And this isn't fun. This isn't like a game. This is like, oh, I hurt someone who was nice to me, who I saved because I knew that he was nice to me and would never hurt me. I told him that I would never hurt him, but he still hurt. and I don't understand. And it's like you can tell like the gears really start to turn, and the way that he approaches being Joker or what he is in relationship to this Joker character that people are putting on him really begins to change when he hears Gary's testimony, and I think it kind of leads down the road to where the film ends up.
Yeah, and I had forgot to mention, like, especially through the earlier portions of the courtroom scenes, Harley is often in the background, like confirming, like someone had criticized the TV movie, and he like turns around and asks Harley if it was good or not. And so for me, I feel like, she could have been there, the character, but I feel like in a lot of ways they were trying to show that Arthur um, looks to others to help explain what's happening. And so for me, I felt like it kind of began this thing of Harley representing the fans, but also Harley kind of representing his relationship with Joker, this other self, because she keeps saying, you can do anything you want and you can do this. And, it was just very interesting. So after the Joker lawyer like takes over, he gets back to the jail and the inmates are singing When the Saints. And so again, this thing of power. Um, he ends up getting like beat up from the the guards. Um, One of the things he says to Puddles was, "No one saw Joker because they weren't really looking." So I thought that was really interesting, and how inside of us we all have these perhaps unseen selves or things that we wish other people would see about us. Um, it's interesting when Arthur said, "That's all, folks," because I remember there was like a Gaga post at Jazz and Piano where she said, "That's all, folks," which I think was like
Mhm.
alluding to the movie. One of the notes I have is, when you put on the makeup, who do you become? And so for us as people, metaphorically, it's like when you look into psychology, like the ego, like we identify with this clothing and these glasses and this beard and all of these things because it helps us explain how we fit into the world. And so I thought that was really interesting. I'm kind of losing my chronology here, um, but one of my favorite scenes of the film was the Build a Mountain scene. Um, because it was like this very soulful, energetic scene. Gaga's on the piano. Joker is like tap dancing. It's this really beautiful scene, and I feel like this scene was the kind of pinnacle of power. And it was, if we go back to the whole music making us feel whole and healing the fractured parts of ourselves, I felt like the Build a Mountain musical scene was sort of like the climax of the power that both characters felt with their sort of alter egos. Oh, and it featured the them getting married too. And Connor and
Right.
I were discussing earlier how they had cut. They showed, so in a lot of the movie posters and stuff, it shows Gaga and Arthur on the stairs, and she's in this like dark blue and floral dress. And that scene was cut from the movie, except for this very quick thing in the Build a Mountain scene. Um, and so we thought it was interesting how they featured the wedding scene, which could have potentially been cut, and how the them on the stairs scene was not in the film.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I had anything to say about it, I mean, in terms of like the the marriage part, I mean, I don't think this is anything necessarily super huge, but she walks over like that really long sort of
Like catwalk.
walkway. Yeah. which is over water towards the island where the altar is, and it's basically like a very kind of basic allegory for the bridge connecting the city of Gotham to Arkham Asylum, and the fact that the asylum is on an island. So she kind of walked her way onto the asylum island. Um, in terms of gonna build a mountain, I mean, I think this film kind of changed my view on that song because, like, if you think about it, going to build a mountain, can humans build mountains? No, not really. That's kind of a nonsensical statement. Like, natural processes build mountains. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of patience to literally build mountains. So, it kind of as like a nothing sort of promise. It's, we're going to build something great, but like something that actually is great takes a lot of effort and time. And that's not what they're really doing. It kind of goes back to what I was saying about limerent traction as opposed to really love.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a nothing promise that she's offering to him. Um, but it also speaks to the shallowness of what she is offering him. Um, and I think it's also a very good allegory for fame, right? We're going to get really famous, and then you kind of are famous, and it's like, well, this kind of sucks. What was this all for? People just sort of expect all this shit from me. Sorry, YouTube censors. Um, and the fact that they kind of got married to that song, and like one of the bigger performances in the movie was to that song, and it was in the same nightclub where he bombed his stand-up routine. Um, kind of is also kind of says something symbolically too,
Yeah.
because that was a whole bunch of nothing, but it got him fame, and now there's a song about a whole bunch of nothing, but it's fame, in basically a similar setting in his mind. Um, I mean, I think it kind of all ties together in an interesting way. If you kind of think about what it really means, and where it's taking place and everything, it's kind of like, you know,
Well, someone had brought up that so after kind of continuing this theme of power, after one of the kind of scenes of Joker as the lawyer, he comes back to the jail and he's, confident, and the guards are pissed off because it's this well, he had just insulted them. He called them like fat pigs, guards, when he was
Which they
right.
no tea made.
But
no pink lemonade.
I won't get into like the extent of what happened, but you just see him be very confident, and the guards are like undressing him and wiping off his makeup. So you see this kind of deconstruction of Joker, and he once again reiterates that his mother was in an abusive relationship. And so going back to what I said about the ripple effect of abuse and stuff like that, it the film really features like how it doesn't just happen to this one person. It's this larger thing. Um, um, so another note I have is like even just being in jail in the 80s is traumatic in and of itself. So how can you expect people to get better if not only they're not receiving the help they need, but they're in this way? And so when he gets taken back to his cell, he's like physically shaking, because he's so upset. We're getting to one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and I think Connor had said as well, is Gaga's bathroom scene. And one reason I wanted to bring this up that I noticed the first time I saw the film, and this could be a complete coincidence, but this is the film that Gaga is singing. Anyone remember what she's singing?
World on a String.
World on a String. And iconic scene. But what I noticed too is the shower is in the background. And this is the scene where, in a way, Harley is kind of taking over Lee, or whichever is like her more evil persona. And the album cover of Harlequin is in the shower. And we now know, which I found out after we recorded the Harlequin podcast, but apparently Gaga had seen two women from a mental institution in a photograph, and they were standing in the shower, one with a life preserver around her neck, which inspired her to make the album cover. But I thought it was interesting that the pinnacle scene for Harley becoming Harley, the shower was featured in the background with very similar tile. That's the scene where she did the thing with the eyes, and I was just so proud of her as an actress.
Yeah, that was great. She said so much with her eyes and commanded so much fury, and she was almost like playful in the sense that she was like putting this mask of her own on. Just like meticulously putting the makeup, smearing it down, having her inner almost like, it's like she was creating this persona for herself that was finally coming out that she could use to like feel strong. And even though it was ultimately just a persona of the Joker's, she was trying to use it as her own to like fit in with him and further, be connected in this like delusional, relationship. Because at the end of the day, she just wanted to feel special, and she thought he made something of his life, as awful as the things he did were. He made something and he was renowned and known now. And it's like she wanted a piece of that. And like immediately after that scene, you see her strutting up the stairs of the court into the courthouse. And it's just like she's completely different. She has like this energy. She's like holding herself up high, swaying, moving her shoulders. And it felt like,
That was a good movement there.
yeah. It felt like she had like found the like inner warrior in herself to feel confident. And I think that's why ultimately when spoilers, when Arthur renounces the Joker, she's so distraught because she's like, I've done everything right. I've made myself the perfect yin to your yang. And now you're saying that thing that I idolized doesn't exist. And that's why she's just like, I'm done, and she leaves.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really hoping, like, again, a criticism for the film, obviously, as a Gaga fan, like, I was hoping for more of that. I wanted more of like a dramatic thing. But I really respect the filmmaker and their choices. I still thoroughly enjoyed the movie regardless, but I definitely wanted more of that. And we'll get into this later, but I wonder if like they were concerned about Gaga getting more attention in the film and not necessarily upstaging Joaquin, but I feel like her transformation and her performance was that good that it could have potentially been distracting to Arthur's storyline.
It's a possibility.
That's just my opinion. So anything else on that scene? Okay, great. So we're getting towards the end, and I had heard a lot of criticism of when Arthur dressed as Joker says there is no Joker. And I'm not sure why, because people had said that it came out of nowhere, and I'm not sure why they thought that, because like maybe perhaps they could have included a flashback scene. I keep using this term of like things being spoon fed to the audience. Like I typically hate movies where there's no like room for provoking thoughts, but you see the judge literally say, so Arthur sits on a stool in the courthouse doing his closing statement and he has a microphone, and you see the judge say something along the lines of, keep in mind this is not a comedy club, you're not on stage. So you can see that Arthur is triggered, and you can see him having a flashback to, if you read into it, to that scene in the first movie, that highly, incredibly uncomfortable scene where he gets on stage and he just is trying to do his comedic bit and it doesn't work. And so it was in that moment, there had been things leading up to this, but in my opinion, it was in that moment that Arthur realized I am all of these things. Just like Gaga had said it in a recent interview when someone had asked her, um, which of Gaga is Stephanie or what is real? And she says, it's all real. It's all me. And so, and she continues to say she believes Harley and Joker are all of it. All of it is them. So I feel like it was in this scene that he really realized like he is all of it. He did kill these people. He did cause the pain in Gary Puddles. And also Sophie, the girl he had a crush on. Um, I feel like he had not until that point seen his how his actions affected other people. And so you see him say, um, there is no Joker. I did everything. And then he does this joke, knock, knock, who's there? Arthur Fleck, who? And then it ends that scene sort of. And so it's this thing of like, who is Arthur Fleck? Who is Joker? I thought it was just very interesting. I'll shut up now. I definitely want to hear what your guys' thoughts are.
It was certainly a choice, and it was a choice that caused, I think, a lot of the fans of the first film to feel like they were being given the middle finger by Todd Phillips. Yeah.
Cal.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I think I explained earlier that I think the biggest switch for him was actually when Gary was testifying, and not necessarily in that moment. But he did say, "I was going to come in here and do a big thing, and now I've changed my mind." So I do think, Blaine, you do have a point in that what the judge said did affect him and ultimately cause him to make the decision to just own up to everything and say, you know what, the Joker is me. I am the Joker. There really isn't a Joker. It's really just me. And I think when he says there is no Joker, it's almost like he's saying everyone else has put the Joker onto me because he's the one who put on the makeup and asked people to call him Joker and everything. But in that moment, it's like, well, actually, no, because it became so much bigger than him. Like all the discussion about Arthur Fleck that he hears on the radio when he's in the car being taken to and from the asylum, for example, is, you know, is he a savior? Is he a martyr? Is he a monster? But they're not really talking about Arthur. Is Arthur a savior? Is Arthur a monster? Is Arthur this? Is Arthur that? They don't care about Arthur. They care about Joker. And he's kind of realizing that Arthur is the one who's hurt people and Arthur is the person. And so he has to say, there isn't really Joker. You're all talking about me. And the person who I am did do these things. Right. Um, and like Connor said, you know, it was, I think a lot of fans of the first film or fans of just, you know, like the DC universe in general who watch this because it's a DC film, quote unquote, felt like it was the middle finger being given to them because they were expecting boom boom, you know, Bonnie and Clyde with Joker and Harlequin fun shenanigans. And in reality, this film is kind of like an art psychoanalysis of one person being pushed to an extreme, but wrapped up in Joker wrapping paper. And I think this scene really is kind of what is Todd finally, you know, like opening the box and saying, ta-da, really is not that. This really is like you missed the point of the first film if that's what you thought this film was going to be. Right. So I think it's a very important scene,
Yeah,
obviously,
I
because
thought it was very, and the events towards the end of the film too. I thought it was very meta in that it's like a lot of fans, my partner included, like wanted it to be a certain way, and they wanted
mhm.
just like we do for Gaga projects. It's like we, wanted it to be this thing, and it's like, um, that's not how it works. And then in addition to that, if we've ever had a fight with our partner or done something or said something that we regret or really hurt someone, sometimes it's like, oh, I got carried away in the moment, and I can't speak for anyone, but I know I'm guilty of like, oh, I was you know, this happened or that happened or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's us. We did this thing. We hurt people. So I feel like it's a story of the human experience. And I don't know, I thought it was interesting. But the reason I think that in a way Harley kind of represents his relationship with Joker, as soon as he says that, she leaves. And so it was this kind of symbolic thing of, well, if you're going to give up on Joker, Joker's going to leave. And this is reiterated coming up when he sees her on the stairs. So then the courtroom, you know, gets blown up. It's like a huge moment, and for the sake of time, I'm like minimizing it. But he like runs out. Some of his fans find him. They drive around, and you get to see Gotham is in this like insane thing. I mean, all throughout the film, you get glimpses of how bad it is, but you see exactly what has happened to the city because of this court case going on and how it's chaos. And he ends up getting out of the car and running. And it was this incredible self-referential moment because the first film starts out with Arthur running away from bullies because he's no one. And in this film, he's running away from fans because he is someone. And it was this very beautiful just juxtaposition thing. And I love self-referential stuff. And a lot of times it can go unnoticed. You know, I can't remember who said it, but when we had the Joker movie night here, someone had mentioned how symbolic the stairs are in the film. And at the end of the film, we see Joker arrive to the stairs, and Lee is in the very middle of the stairs. And another criticism is, you know, her hair was cut, and we had all kind of been waiting for this moment of her in this wig. Number one, a scene showing her cut her hair. It just sort of like happened. And we had seen a lot of people had seen, you know, someone had filmed her performing That's Entertainment on the steps, and then the police like come down. And I personally think because it was a public scene, they had probably filmed different things to avoid the end leaking. With that said, I definitely wanted more. But anyway, so he arrives at the steps, and in the first film, for me, the steps kind of symbolize him going to and from madness, or in this film, he's kind of meeting madness in the middle because she's in the very middle of the steps. And so he's saying, I escaped, and, you know, we can go live our lives now and have this child or whatever, you know, that doesn't exist. And she says, you know, it was all a fantasy. And, you know, she starts singing That's Entertainment in a very like small way. And there were parts in the film where like she had gone up to his lawyer and said like, we're going to build a mountain. And so I feel like there were these very subtle places where you realize like she's stuck in this musical wackadoo world where she just like starts singing. And I feel like that is kind of like what Harlequin the album really is. But then we see like she says, you know, goodbye Arthur, and he leaves. And then he gets taken back to the jail. But yeah, the notes I have are just meeting his madness. She says all we had was the fantasy. What do you guys have anything to add to the steps scene?
So I know a lot of people are pissed that we didn't get this big transformation scene where she comes home from the courtroom trial pissed, and she cuts her hair and just absolutely loses it and goes bonkers. And I'm one of them. I wanted it. I was mad that I didn't get it. Todd Phillips, when I catch you. But I don't think it was done random.
Toad Phillips.
Todd Phillips. I don't think it was done randomly. I think in the editing room, he decided he wanted to leave it up to the audience's interpretation if that last scene with Harley is actually her or not. Because we get a quick shot of her in her hotel with a gun to her head when Arthur is before the sentencing is read. He's like trying to apologize to her on the phone and make her understand, and she's just listening to the voicemail with a gun to her head. I think there's a real chance that she killed herself, and that scene on the stairs is just Joker imagining, you know, him saying goodbye to her. So I think he wanted to leave it up to audience interpretation on if that was based in reality or not. Um, but I will say I understand people being very confused because she's in the scene is just like, that's entertainment, but stop singing, that's entertainment. And then she just walks away. Like, girl, so confusing.
I mean, I guess I have stuff to say about that scene, but like the whole sequence from the sentencing to her walking up the steps and out of frame, I guess I have stuff to say about. So we see throughout the film, it relies on music, right? And in the first film, Arthur had that uncontrollable laughing tic. He had that condition that caused him to spasm in laughter that he couldn't control. And in this film, there was a lot less of it. Um, and I think to a degree, the musical therapy was helping. He could get that emotion out through song as opposed to not having an outlet and it just sort of coming out with these, laughing spasms that he can't control.
I never thought of
But
that.
during the sentencing, when he has renounced the Joker and the music is done and everything, and Harley is gone and she's not showing up, and they read like the first count, second count, third count, what does he do? He does the laugh. He does the painful laugh. He has these emotions, but now the music is not the way that he can get them out. And so the laugh comes back. And so I think that's kind of cool to notice.
Hmm.
Second thing is from him waking up after the car bomb all the way to him running out of the taxi away from his fans, all of that is a single shot. I don't know if people noticed that either, but I think that was an interesting artistic choice on the director's part to have him waking up from the car bomb, getting out, being found by his fans, getting in the car, hearing about the fact that it was a car bomb, realizing he doesn't want to be with fans, getting out of the car, running from the fans. All of that is one continuous handheld shot. Now I was not put into film school, so I don't know if there's like a list of like particular reasons why you should use singular shots as opposed to multi shots or whatever. So I can't say like why he would have done that particular artistic choice, but that's something I did notice. And then, like Connor said, Todd left it kind of ambiguous as to whether Harley was actually on the stairs or not. Um, and going back to how the music has essentially sort of left Arthur at that point, when Harley starts to sing that's entertainment, kind of, rubbing it in, like, oh, I was really only there for the fantasy of it, blah, blah, blah. And she starts to sing. He literally is like, shut up, stop singing, right? Whereas before, singing was like, oh, this is great. And now I have somebody and I feel like singing. And now it's like, shut up, stop, right? So it kind of is like a full circle. Once Harley is out of the picture as like a legitimate interest and the public is gone or the audience is gone and the Joker is gone, music is not what he even wants anymore. Not only does he not have it, but it's apparently like, okay, stop.
Yeah, I think he even says, I don't want to sing anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I guess the third point I wanted to make about this whole sequence is that when Harley leaves the staircase, whether she's real or not, she goes up and the police arrive, at the bottom of the stairs. Now we know that Marianne said that Harley, is this rich kid, her dad is a doctor, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, when we last see her, she kind of ascends and goes up back to her previous rich life where she doesn't have to deal with Arthur and Gotham and everything at the foot of the stairs anymore. She just kind of goes up and away. And then what's at the bottom of the stairs, the riffraff kind of comes for him and that life kind of hits him again where he's just going to live in the asylum all over again. And I saw this interesting analysis which kind of ties into the very end of the film, but I'll say it here. where it's almost like Harley kills Arthur's spirit, his soul, and then at the end of the film, that one inmate kills Arthur's body, right? So there's that kind of thing going on as well. But I had a couple of points to make about the whole sequence, and now I'm done with my time.
I love that.
Defense rests.
That
Cal, you're making me want to like this movie more.
Sorry. Sorry,
um
can't help it.
so he gets taken back to the institution, and we're coming up on the iconic ending. And so we hear, this is another thing, is that we hear that Arthur has a visitor. So we obviously never find out who the visitor was.
Oh,
Um,
that's I forgot about that.
Mhm.
I
um,
wonder
so then
what that is.
he goes into the hallway, and then for whatever reason the guard keeps walking. I don't know what that was about, but the inmate that you've kind of seen throughout the whole movie, uh, stalking or whatever Arthur. Um, and also, upon my second viewing, I noticed that in the first scene where they're shaving Arthur's face, they're talking about this person, this new inmate who all he does is laugh, and he had like bitten someone. And so, upon seeing it again, you kind of see how they set these things up. Anyway, so this
I to-
inmate,
I totally forgot about that.
yeah, there's these little things. And so the we don't even know the name of this person, but he asks if he can tell Arthur a joke. He proceeds to tell him this joke about a psychopath walks into a bar and approaches a famous clown, something something something. And then um in the first film, right before Joker kills Murray, he says, "You get what you fucking deserve," and then he shoots Murray. And then right before this inmate stabs Arthur, he says, "You get what you deserve." And so it was this very cyclical type of thing. So he like stabs Arthur like 500 million times, and then it's this heartbreakingly beautiful scene where it goes back to the sort of Sonny and Cher Harley show, and he sings a line from Gonna Build a Mountain.
Yeah.
And it's this heartbreaking scene where like blood is coming out of his mouth, and he's saying like, it's I can't remember the lyric, but it's something like, I'm gonna find a, does anyone know, I'm gonna find a something to take my place.
Yeah, a son to take my place and build a nice place for him from heaven and blah blah blah. So basically, it's about passing the mantle on, you know,
Yeah.
further down the line, and you know,
And in a way, he is through that inmate.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of implied that that inmate is the real Joker of that universe, especially when he cuts the Glaswegian smile into his face after shanking Arthur.
Twist.
Unfortunately, I had been spoiled as a moderator. Like, I have to read so many things, and I had been spoiled for that, which really pissed me off, actually. One of the reasons why I was really adamant about people using the spoiler tags in appropriate channels. But that's neither here nor there. I thought it was an amazing twist. I thought that so he falls to the ground. And another thing that I noticed is in the very beginning of the film, when they're shaving his face, they cut his lip and it starts to bleed. And then the very last shot of the film, he's like on his side, and I think it's saliva, but either way, it's the same side of his mouth, and it's coming out. So it was almost like
Yep.
foreshadowing. Um, so what did we think of? And then Gaga's singing "That's Life" begins, and then it goes to the credits. So before we get into anything else, what did we think of like the final scene?
I know a lot of people hate it, but it's actually one of the things about the film that I liked because it was just like symbolic of like that's just how life goes sometimes. It sucks. And to just not only have like a tragic ending, like this is some great Shakespearean production, to to have to have the person, the way he meets his demise be the person even crazier than him who then just starts to cut into his face, I thought was also a great ode to the 2008 Heath Ledger Joker. Um, so I totally saw what Todd was doing there and his attention, and I liked it. It was very bold and unexpected. And I think a lot of fans of the first film probably feel cheated, confused, angry, and upset, which is another reason why we're seeing such a visceral reaction that I don't think we've ever really seen from a major blockbuster in quite some time.
Yeah, I guess I have two or three little points. I mean, Bling brought up one of the things I was going to say, which was the mirroring of the blood, in the corner of his lip between the shaving scene and now. But there was also a part during his interview with Patty where there was a red lens flare right here during the interview. Um, I'm not entirely sure why they would kind of connect that part to the rest of it, but I noticed that there was that kind of similarity with the symbolism here. What else was I going to say? So the cartoon on the TV that he's watching before he gets called to see the visitor and his demise
Pepe
is
Le
a
Pew thing.
Pepe Le Pew thing. And so there's like this the surface analysis of, oh, Pepe Le Pew is always trying to find someone to fall in love with and keeps failing, right? So that was what happened with Arthur and Lee. But I also think you could see it as Arthur is the skunk and Lee is Pepe, or Lee in the audience and the general public is Pepe. So the cartoon of Pepe Le Pew, who he always falls for, is this cat who is not a skunk, and Pepe only likes the cat, only tries to go after the cat when something happens and she puts this white stripe down her back on accident. Um, and so Arthur is the cat, and he's just trying to live his life, and suddenly he finds himself with fame on accident, essentially, due to extenuating circumstances, and white paint is involved. And now he has this force after him that he can't control and he doesn't know, right? And so I think no matter which one you put them in, Harley and Joker, or Arthur and Lee, as Pepe and the cat, either one, the analysis works. So I think that's a kind of cool, sort of last nod on the television, plus the whole cartoon thing being a thing since the very beginning of the movie with the custom cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
What was the last thing I wanted to say? I think it was that, so Connor brought up how the Glaswegian smile thing at the very end made it somewhat reminiscent of the 2008 Heath Ledger Joker. And that kind of gets into, I think, why a lot of dude bros really, really hate this movie, because they see that film as like perfect and sacrosanct, and you can't touch it, and these universes are supposed to be different. And, this Joker is a loser and he's dying, and that one was, perfect. And how dare you even try to assume that this is the same? Like, there's all that kind of narrative going into it, and how dare Todd Phillips try to make this part of the Nolan universe and blah 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 blah. But whatever. As for who the individual was who called, to kind of get him into that hallway, I mean, the point is, well, we're not going to ever really know. It could even just be a complete and utter setup by the guards, right? Just to get him to die, because they were already mad enough to possibly sexually assault him in the bathroom anyway. Um, and I really even don't think it matters. I think that's kind of getting outside the point of what the ending was, kind of wondering who it was. I mean, I don't think that's ultimately important, but that's my couple of cents on the ending.
Yeah, I guess I really benefit from being a incredibly casual, like completely outside of the DC universe
Hmm.
world. I grew up with like Michael Keaton and George Clooney as Batman, and that whole thing. That's the only reason why I know who Harvey Dent is. And so I obviously saw like The Dark Knight and some of the other ones, but I was not bothered by that, because it's clear this is a completely different tone. This is a completely different world. It's a completely different Harley completely different Joker. Uh, yeah, I mean the lines are blurred, but I would like to get into um our personal thoughts on the film. I know I've talked a lot, so I'll keep this brief. Um, I personally really enjoyed the film. In a weird way, I feel like reading some spoilers by accident kind of adjusted my expectations for viewing it, because we had already seen like Gaga's more supporting and all of these things, so my expectations were definitely made. I shared a lot of my criticisms of the film. I definitely wish we had more buildup of Harley and Joker so you could kind of root for them, but again, I don't know if that was necessarily the point. I shared a bunch of my thoughts as far as like what the layers are and everything. So I love a good thought provoking film. I loved the first one, and I think I almost like this one more because the first one I have only seen twice because it's so triggering for me. And I feel like this movie um, touched on a lot more of the same topics, but in a different way that's not as like visceral. So I really enjoyed the film. I understand some of the criticisms. Obviously, would have loved more Gaga. I would give it like 8.5 or 9 out of 10. I saw it once in IMAX, and then the next day I saw it standard. Um, and I don't know. I thought the acting was great, the writing was great, the symbolism and deeper meanings was great. Um, so what did you guys think? And then we can get into a couple other things. And just so you guys know, we will be opening the stage up so you guys can share your thoughts on voice or video as well. Anybody want to give their
Connor.
review of the film?
Us or the crowd?
Us.
You or
Oh,
Cal?
um, I appreciated everything that Mr. Phillips tried to do here. I really do. There was a lot of bold swings, bold in and of itself to make this a some kind of quasi musical. I just don't think it overall worked completely for me. I really was taken aback by how much time was spent in that trial courtroom. And I know one common complaint that I think is reasonable because there's a lot of complaints with this movie going on in the internet that I think is just absolutely ridiculous. But one legitimate complaint I would agree with is as a large chunk of the film is very like it's not action packed, and we spend a lot of time in the courtroom, and it's very introspective, and you get to know Arthur in the jail. And for people to call the film boring, I can understand because you really just have to sit there and basically watch Arthur go through the hell of the hell of a court trial and then die. And I can see why people might be just leaving the theater feeling like underwhelmed and like not satisfied because I do think it's a film that is not what the general public want. They like escape the police and go on a rampage across Gotham and are like Bonnie and Clyde.
Connor, I think you are frozen in time. I cannot hear you, and your picture is frozen.
Yeah. Oh, bye. still just rotating boxes for me.
Cal, do you want to start, and then we can maybe finish the rest of Connor's? Why do you both have to have C
Sure.
names?
All right. I guess, I mean, I will preface this by saying I'm not really a movie person. I don't watch a whole lot of movies. It's not like one of my pastimes. It's not one of the ways I prefer to spend my free time. Um, so it's not like I went into this with like, I know so much about movies and this sucks, or I know so much about movies and like, I'm much more apathetic when it comes to films and everything. Um, the more the film wore on, the more like I said earlier, it became more apparent that this was not really a DC Batman movie. It was Todd Phillips' own movie about power, fame, mental illness, that type of thing, just sort of put into this universe, possibly just to get a budget big enough to do it. Um, and I think he believed that people did not interpret the first film correctly. And so he took the opportunity with a budget to say, this is really what I meant for you to get out of Arthur Fleck. And now he's dead, and I don't have to come back to this stuff anymore, and blah, 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 So I think a lot of people, a lot of the negative reviews are really misinterpreting it. But I also think that a lot of people do understand that, it was never really supposed to be a Batman film, and it's sort of like this other project, and they're not happy about that, especially because so much of it could be so much of it could be construed as I am taking this film to directly criticize the audience of this movie while they're watching it, which I think is really meta and really cool, mostly because I've never been to film school. So there's probably plenty of films out there like that. But for me, that's kind of new. So I was like, oh, that's super cool. I like that. Now, as someone who does not know a whole lot about films, did he do a good job at doing what he wanted to do? That's a different question. Um, I think, it was shot in a good way. He had great actors on his side doing great acting. Um, do I think the musical parts really were that critical to getting the point of what he wanted to get across done? I'm not so sure. I do think, the way he was using musical numbers is not a very typical way, right? Just like they said, because typically in a musical, most of his songs are new, for one thing. But also, when there's a reprise of a song, it's typically only one, max two songs, and it kind of is designed to show a change in a character or a change in a situation compared to the first time that song was sung. But in this film, there's so many reprisals of same songs that are not unique to this film, right? There's only what Folie à Deux and Happy Mistake, and Happy Mistake wasn't even in this movie. Um, and they're sung so often that it's more like in like another movie how they have themes for different characters, like leitmotifs, as they're called, and like certain situations or certain characters will have certain musical themes accompany them. And it's almost like the same song from the 1930s will happen 5 or 6 times in this film. And I've only watched it the once, so I don't know if there's like I don't know if I'm right, if there's like a certain leitmotif to each individual old show tune, right? And we're supposed to kind of understand how they're used in that manner. But I think it's more used in that way than a typical musical would use film. And once, I kind of get my head around that, maybe it'll make more sense. But right now, I'm still kind of not sure. And I also think I know for sure that when the film was over and I was walking out, it took me an extra 24 hours of thinking about it and mulling it over before I kind of understood kind of that it was an art film and Harley was representative of something bigger as like an audience or about fame or about, Arthur being able to engage with the external, people who are making the Joker what it is as opposed to, Harley as a character. Harley's not a character. That's why she does not undergo as much development as people want her to, because she's literally just a vehicle for a certain thing. And I think the whole film kind of treats characters in that way. They're vehicles for particular purposes that Todd Phillips is trying to express with the movie as a whole. They're not really people. Um, and I mean, do I like that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about movies. I was fine with it, once I got my head around it. I mean, I would give the movie like a 6 out of 10, I guess, just because. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what's supposed to be good cinema or not, and did I like it? I mean, like I've been saying, like I don't know if everything had to be done the exact way that he did it for that point to get across. And there might be movies in a similar vein which did it better. So I think 6 out of 10 is fine. Maybe 6.5 out of 10. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you, Cal, and apologies about cutting out. Is my audio good?
Yeah, for now. Keep talking,
Good.
we'll see.
Um, so Todd Phillips had a lot of interesting ideas, and at the end of the day, I don't know if he executed all of those ideas well enough. There were a lot of interesting creative choices from day one. This being a musical, though, was certainly going to turn fans of the original Joker off. And he basically made like an anti sequel to the Joker because, in so many ways, he flip flops what fanatics of the first film loved. And I appreciated such a big, bold creative swing. But
Yeah.
when you take such a big, bold creative swing, you run the risk of failing. And in quite a few ways, I think this film does unfortunately fail. Gaga is great. She has some of the best acting she's ever done on screen in this film. But I do wanted more of her. And like you said, Cal, the way this film uses characters as vehicles for the plot to move forward instead of actually really diving into them, I think it's a real problem, particularly for her character. Saying all that, while I wasn't blown away by the film and I did ultimately walk out of the theater disappointed, I do think this visceral, just hatred, this bandwagon that's going on
Mm.
is absolutely like it's something I've never seen before. And I think it's so unwarranted. I mean, if you want to hate the film, that's fine. But seeing people give this like not even 1 star and like half a star, it just blows my mind. And maybe it's just because it's such an anti sequel to the first Joker because it's Todd Phillips basically saying you idolized this guy. Well, here, let me flip the script. Let me show you how he really is just a broken man. And basically everything you loved with the first film was a lie. So in a lot of ways, I really do commend and appreciate all that. But at the end of the day, I just felt really bored with the middle section of this film. A lot of the courtroom trial stuff really could have been tightened up. And I really wish the studio had decided to do a test screening because I feel like audiences would have told them the court stuff really needs to be reworked. But you got to give credit to Todd Phillips sticking to his creative vision and his guns because it certainly feels like his vision. I don't really see WB executives greenlighting this kind of sequel unless they trusted him. And I think they kept asking and pressuring him for so long to make a sequel since the first film made so much money that he finally said, fine, but I'm going to do it my way.
Mm.
Um, and so we'll talk about this in a second, but the reaction is just crazy. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is like a sin to cinema. I also don't think it's like God's gift to cinema. I'm kind of with you, Cal, in the middle. I'd say right now I probably would give this a 6. It's not a terrible movie at all. But I do think I preferred the first film more. And admittedly, and I can admit this, I probably would have enjoyed the film more had there been more Lady Gaga because she's so good in the scenes that she has as Harley that I just wanted more of them because she was just it was delicious to watch her take this character that people have seen played by by other actresses and just absolutely revitalize it and make it her own. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think we can slowly segue into the segment where we'll talk about like the reaction of the film, and then we'll close out with how this is related to the Harlequin album, and then we'll open up. I'll stop recording, and then I'll open up the stage for you guys to join if you want. Um, but so like I went to school for marketing, which has not helped me in my real life. But I think the marketing for this film was a big problem. Um, One thing Connor and I had discussed was again the fact that so many movie posters featured Gaga with like the white tights and the flats, and they're both on the stairs, and it was this iconic scene that we were all kind of looking forward to that never came. But it wasn't even just in the trailers, because it's very common for trailers to feature scenes that are not necessarily in the film. But this was a situation where mass marketing materials, whether it be posters, there were even stairs painted like throughout the world to promote the movie, that featured, I believe, both Harley and Arthur on there. And so not only was like the visual media somewhat misleading, also, or I'm sorry, the non video media, the trailers I feel were kind of misleading, because there was so much Gaga stuff that wasn't in there. And I feel like a lot of people within the server who went to see this are Gaga fans, not necessarily Joker fans. I am both, if we're talking about the Todd Phillips 2019 Joker. So I definitely like enjoyed the film because I like the Arthur character, but I feel like so many people were frustrated with the marketing. And I feel like a lot of Gaga fans felt cheated, honestly, for her doing all of this promo, this companion album, and then her character is largely supporting in the film. And so, yeah, I feel like Connor can really speak more to like what is being said elsewhere, and maybe give us some insight into, or Cal, uh, why this kind of like backlash is happening. But the only thing I can really speak to is the marketing.
Yeah, and I think we've already kind of touched on a big point of why the backlash is happening is because Todd Phillips in a way gave a middle finger to the diehard fans of the first film, and they're uncomfortable with that and angry. Um, uh, but past that, a lot of things are at play here. This reminds me very much of The Last Jedi from 2016. Fans were not happy with the choices that director Ryan Johnson made with that movie. Choices with Rey, the leading new girl character of the new reboot trilogy. They didn't like the lack of Luke Skywalker screen time, the way he had become disillusioned with the Jedi way, and there was just this like review bombing and internet trolling all over, to the point where Rotten Tomatoes actually had to introduce a new system in place where if you wanted to review the movie, that makes up audiences reviews make up the audience score next to the critic score. They had to implement a new system in place where you had to verify and like post a picture of your ticket that you actually went. So when you actually go on an audience review score for a movie on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll notice there's a verified score and then an like all score. And all score is just anyone on the internet can vote. I usually look at the score from audience members because I at least know that's the score that people who actually saw the film gave. Um, but it's just this internet backlash of Todd Phillips not doing what diehard fans wanted. And critics, I don't think, really liked the film. But now that fans don't like it either, I think some critics are just deciding to jump on that bandwagon. It took a while for a lot of reviews to set in, and I do wonder if critics were waiting for their highly esteemed peers from publications like LA Times or the Chicago Tribune to post their thoughts before they could be like, okay, so someone I respect in the community didn't like the film. I don't think I'm going to like it either. And it just created this giant like snowball effect, and unfortunately, it's the perfect storm. Another big factor is also the musical element. I just think that was going to turn off a lot of fans of the original. and they kind of danced around it. In interviews, they said it's not really a musical. The trailers had music in it, but it wasn't like flat out saying it was a musical. And now we've gotten to this perfect storm where it's gotten, like, unfortunately, the lowest cinema score for a comic book movie, a D. It's not going to have a great opening. And unfortunately, it's just all this pressure and hate that's like tearing the film down. Um, it's offering a lot of discussion. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok talk about it. And I do think it's going to be a film that's going to be discussed for a very long time. But unfortunately, all that noise has really affected the film. And it's unfortunate because I can tell when she signed on for this that she was really passionate to make Lee not like a caricature, like not some hammer wielding like clown like she had been in the comics. She really wanted to make Lee like a real woman. And it would have been nice to see her really dive into that if she had been given more screen time. I don't know anything that happened behind the scenes. There's a lot of rumors and hearsay. I'm not going to speak on that because I just don't know. But it's interesting to see how this film would have turned out had the studio done some test screenings. Very reliable film industry media sources are reporting that Warner Brothers chose not to test this movie. In Hollywood, it's very commonplace for studios, especially with their big budget blockbusters, to test the film and see how ordinary general audience members like it. Do they like the ending? Do we need to fix the pacing? Do we need to maybe move scenes around? They didn't do that, and so it would have been curious maybe if they had gotten some feedback how this movie would have changed. Um, but that's the past. We can't change it. I will say I do think this movie is going to be looked at more fondly in the years to come. It's being like regarded as some awful movie, like some real actual superhero movie stinkers that have come out recently, and it's just not in the same quality. So I mean, I'll just end with this. In the 80s, Blade Runner with Harrison Ford was considered a flop financially, and it was not well reviewed. And now it's regarded as one of the most exquisite, top-notch sci-fi movies ever, to the point where the appreciation for it over the decades got so big and huge that they decided to make a sequel with Ryan Gosling a couple years ago. So it would not surprise me in the slightest that in decades from now, this film is looked on in a fonder light.
Yeah, the only thank you for that. The only thing I can add to that is, like, as someone who does like certain musicals, I don't like every musical, but I like some. I understand the criticisms because it's a musical in a way that obviously there are scenes where people are singing, um not on a stage like in regular situations, but the voices that they use to sing is, from these broken characters. And so it was like, it doesn't necessarily give a lot of replay value from a, oh, I love this song from this musical standpoint. So it's kind of in this weird limbo where, from a music therapy standpoint, I definitely understand why they chose to go this route. But from a musical fan standpoint, it's not like I'm itching to hear, Gaga with these fried vocals sing Get Happy or whatever. That's why we have Harlequin, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, I feel like that's another aspect. Is someone had commented, I hate that we live in a world where art has to be uh group uh something about like filtering art through something. And I definitely understand that. I feel like if this movie was not associated with the superhero world, if this movie was not having to go through the machine, as Gaga has talked about, of like marketing and trying to sell it and everything, I feel like it would have gone a lot differently. But unfortunately, we live in a world where, like, there has to have sex appeal. It has to appeal to, the typical DC fan. It has to appeal to award voters. So I feel like, unfortunately, art exists as kind of it always has, like ever since awards have come around. But I feel like now we're in this very hyper focused way of, like Connor was saying, this like snowball effect of negativity. And um it's like one of the reviews that said like it couldn't decide if it was a musical or not. And like some of the scenes reminded me of this musical from like the early 2000s called Oh Brother Where Art Thou. But the vocals in that movie are, you know, smooth and crisp and everything. So it's like I get why they chose to do the broken or sort of the not super great vocals. I personally really enjoyed Joaquin's vocals, and some of Gaga's, but I don't know, the part of a musical is like having this replay value, and I don't think that we got that. Like I have replay value for the film, but I wouldn't watch it for the songs. Whereas some
Yeah, for
musicals
sure.
you watch for the songs.
I wonder how this does on streaming, because unfortunately, I think a lot of people uh, are now like either canceling tickets, or if they had plans to see it like next week, they're not going to anymore because of this like intense negativity snowballing effect. But it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people decide to give this a chance that were on the fence on streaming. I'm not saying WB will suddenly turn a profit, but it wouldn't surprise me if it actually does better on streaming. It's going to be interesting in the next few years. I kind of wish this had just been like a smash for her out of the gate, just because I love seeing her do well. But you know, not to be cliche, but that's life sometimes. It works out and then it doesn't. And the big thing is she is going to be fine. There's such like hyperbole going on right now amidst all the negativity. Like people are acting like she's done as like an actor, which is like mind blowing to me that we can be like that reactionary. Everything is fine, you know, everything is a okay. Everyone is praising her. I mean, I'm a fan and I don't want to be delusional, but I've actually looked through most of the reviews and I do not find any criticism. So everyone adores her. She's an industry darling. Things are okay. And, you know, we'll see what happens with the film in the coming weeks. And the most important news is we're getting a brand new pop single soon. And that is going to be an amazing way to continue just her being in this media blitz where she's just everywhere all at once.
Yeah, like with all the reviews and all the negative stuff that I've seen, and I mean I'm not on Twitter. I don't get into that kind of cesspool level of stuff. Um, but none of the stuff that I've seen really points at Gaga and says she ruined it. She's the bad part of this film. This, that, the other thing. It's always like Gaga's really good and she sings really well and she does her job well and she's a great actress. I just don't like the movie for these other reasons. And so I think someone either earlier today or yesterday said that Grease Randolph said that Gaga should take a really long break and don't act for a long time because this movie's going to ruin her. It's like, oh, F off. Like, no, Gaga did as well as an actor could do considering the reception of this film. It's kind of similar to House of Gucci, where people didn't really like House of Gucci, but they said Gaga was really good in it, right? So, I mean, what more can you really ask for?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've said what I need to say about the reaction, but I'm assuming if you've made it this far, you've seen the film, so I'm not going to say go see it. But what I've told people is ignore my review, ignore everyone's reviews, and just go see it and make a judgment of yourself, of
Yeah,
your own.
I'd say if you're really on the fence, then like just try and find a matinee showing. I think most theaters on like Tuesdays have like a matinee showing that's like cheap. So if you want to see the movie and still support her, just, you know, do that or wait and rent it in a couple weeks. Like, but form your own opinion. I mean, there are movies that have been praised that I just didn't think were that special, and there have been movies that have been absolutely panned that I actually had a decent time with. So film is super subjective, like all art, and you just have to make up your own opinion.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I definitely want to give the audience a chance to interact. But as far as the Harlequin album, I don't know if like Gaga knew that she would be like underrepresented. I don't know if she knew that, you know, the songs featured in the film needed to be more like now that I've seen the film, I'm like in a sort of cynical way like questioning the motives behind making the Harlequin album. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. I've been listening to it nonstop. But it does beg the question like um given her sort of reduced thing in the film, was the Harlequin album really like this genuine passion project, or was it something like I enjoyed the film more having heard the Harlequin album prior to. So again, I don't want to spend too much time in this, but I think essentially the Harlequin album is not only an extension of the character from the film, but it's also this like childlike revisitation for Gaga or Stephanie uh through her love of music, because a lot of the moments in the album remind me of like Gaga performing before she was famous at the bitter end. So I feel like the album is essentially the result of Gaga now through exploring uh, what she explored in her exploration of Harley.
I think it was great for her to push this out first because A, it was new music from her. B, it was a taste of the music from the album, although reimagined. But honestly, like since the soundtrack is like a lot of fried vocals, like very like slow, ambient, just like depressing kind of covers of jazz and classic songs. I actually listened to the Harley Quinn album after the movie, after I saw it, and I found myself appreciating it a lot more. Like I was bopping to Good Morning and Get Happy driving this morning and like feeling pretty good about myself. Like I low key think this is gonna smash during Thanksgiving and Christmas because it really gives like holiday fall. You're having like a whiskey old fashioned in like a hotel bar in the winter kind of vibes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I liked hearing the album beforehand, and I mean, it's not going to be like LG7 levels of success coming out of this album. Um, but I'm glad that considering what happened with the way her character was edited, that she managed to get her perspective and her artistic juices flowing into a separate project that can stand on its own and is probably one of her better albums that she's released. I mean, she sounds amazing on it. She sounds happy, like she's having fun, and you know, um, I don't have a whole lot to say about that, but
Yeah, I'm really glad that it exists because unfortunately the Joker soundtrack does not have a lot of replay value. So I've never been like a show tunes person. It's always been very corny to me, but Gaga has really done this like mastermind thing of making it appealing and making it um palatable to perhaps people who aren't necessarily fans of that genre. So I love it. I do want to close out here because we're currently at 2 hours and 30 minutes for this video. So I just want to thank anyone who has stuck around this long. But we have been waiting so long for this film project, so it makes sense for us to really dive into the themes and how Gaga did, what it means for her character, what it means for her future acting career. So we want to invite you to listen to the House of Delusion podcast on Spotify. We're also on YouTube. So we have live episodes like this on YouTube, and we also have the audio versions as well. We just started season 2, so it's going to be very exciting stuff. So I'm Cal, and obviously I'm Cal. Hello.
Oh,
hi,
the
I'm
I'm
Kyle, and when
I
people make fun of me, they make me sound like Bullwinkle.
I'm old and I was reading Cal's name. So I'm Bling. I was joined today by Cal and Connor. You can, I'm doing this all by memory. You can find us on Twitter by searching at House of Delulu. You can find us on YouTube also at House of Delulu, and come and join our Discord so you can join not only the conversations here, but also live stage events like this one at discord.gg, like Gaga, /House of Delulu. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.